Hey historians, this is Mrs. Tyler. Today we are going to do Unit 3, Notes 1. Unit 3 is the Civil War and Reconstruction, and we're going to start with life in slavery. So if you would turn to pages 3 and 4 in our new Unit 3 notes packet, that would be super helpful for you. They look like this. They say Notes 1 up here in the corner like this, and the page number is down at the bottom. All right, slavery had been a part of most societies since the earliest civilizations of Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt. The African slave trade began with the Portuguese in 1526, and other European countries were soon to follow. In our notes packet, the vocabulary is listed first. The definition is provided for you, but you need to use a highlighter or just underline at least 3 context clue words in the sentence, in the definition, that help you best understand the vocabulary words definition. So I chose selling people slaves as my 3 context clues for understanding the definition of slave trade. By the 1700s, the British, French, Spanish, and Dutch empires were all involved in what we call the triangular trade. And you can see here on this map what the triangular trade looks like. We've got Europe here. Here's Portugal. That was the first country because it's very, very close. You can see how close Portugal is to Africa. So the European countries here would manufacture, once the Industrial Revolution hit Europe, they would manufacture products that could be sold and traded to tribes in West Africa who would capture enemies, members from enemy tribes, warring tribes, and sell them to the European slave traders. So they would produce firearms like guns and weapons, cloth, salt, etc. They would trade them to members of tribes in West Africa who would round up members from enemy tribes, kidnap them, and sell them into slavery. Those slaves were then taken along this route across the Atlantic Ocean. We call this the Middle Passage because it carried slaves, and it was the middle of this 3-part trade system. The West Indies and Caribbean Sea were where many of the slaves ended up, but many also ended up in the southern parts of the United States and in South America as well. Brazil, Brazil, and in those areas. Okay. So we're going to define triangular trade. It's the exchange of manufactured goods from Europe for the slaves in Africa. The slaves were brought across the Atlantic Ocean where they were sold in exchange for cash crops from the Americas. Those cash crops or raw materials were then brought back to Europe to be manufactured, and this whole cycle would just continue. The southern colonies imported slaves using the Atlantic slave trade to provide laborers for plantation crops such as tobacco, indigo, rice, and cotton. While some of our country's founding fathers objected to slavery, others, including Thomas Jefferson, had owned slaves. There were a number of debates over slavery when the Constitution was being written. The southern states would not ratify the Constitution if it was going to threaten their economic and cultural structure. We talked about those debates, like the 3/5 Compromise, when we talked in Unit 1 about writing the Constitution. This is Thomas Jefferson. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, and the first statement says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." But the reality was that Thomas Jefferson himself had inherited a huge plantation in Virginia from his family that had 600 slaves. The Constitution allowed Congress to revisit the issue of slavery 20 years after the Constitution was signed. So in 1808, when Thomas Jefferson himself became president, Congress banned the Atlantic slave trade that brought slaves from Africa. However, smuggling was still common, and buying and selling slaves in the United States was still legal in nearly half of the states. So here's Thomas Jefferson, who owns slaves, but he's willing to ban the Atlantic slave trade. He signs that into law. He could have vetoed it if he really strongly felt that it was something that was really important, but instead he decided that this was something to sign into law, which kind of shows that people can be pretty complicated. Everyone's kind of got this mix inside of them where they might do something right and something wrong at the same time. Okay, and Jefferson was one of those people. The reality was that most of our founding fathers believed that the slave trade was not going to, that slavery itself in the United States was not going to last for very long because it was very, very expensive. And literally only 1/4 of the population of the South had enough money to even own slaves. So it's 1/4 of less than half of the U.S. population. But that small group had a lot of power and influence in Congress, and they're going to hold on to it for quite a while. What really ends up expanding slavery, though, instead of having it fizzle out like the founding fathers intended or hoped or anticipated, the invention of the cotton gin and the expansion of industrialization, especially those textile factories in the North, they didn't allow slavery in the North, but they sure used that cheap cotton that came from the South to create and to make and mass produce the cloth in the textile mills in the North. So because of those textile mills and the invention of the cotton gin, slavery ended up growing. So in your notes, you're going to fill in these blanks. For the 1600s, Britain, Spain, and Portugal brought African slaves to the Americas. In the 1700s, southern colonies relied on slave labor. And in the 1800s, foreign slave trade was banned in 1808 in the U.S. The cotton gin had made growing cotton more profitable. In 1790, the South produced 3,000 bales of cotton. Because of the cotton gin, though, the cotton kingdom expanded throughout the South. And by 1850, cotton production had increased to 4 million bales a year. As cotton brought more wealth to the South, the value of slaves increased. The more money that the Southern plantation owners made from cotton, the more valuable those slaves became. So the more resistant slave owners became to the idea of ending slavery. You can see the cotton becomes king through this region. We talked about how Texas had even become a slave state. One of the reasons why settlers had gone into Texas in the first place and wanted independence from Mexico was because they wanted to be able to grow cotton. Only wealthy planters had enough money to afford to buy slaves. The majority of white Southerners were just too poor to be slave owners, but all Southerners, whether they were wealthy landowners or not, knew that the economy and social structure of the entire South relied on growing cotton, and that relied on slavery. So in their eyes, freeing slaves could only lead to complete financial ruin for the South. So the economics of slavery, only a small percent of Southerners could afford to buy slaves. The South's entire economy relied on growing cotton, and they truly felt that ending slavery would ruin their economy. Not all Black people who lived in the United States were slaves. Northern states had banned slavery. 8% of Blacks in the United States lived in northern free states. Their lives were much freer than Black people living in the southern slave states. However, northern Blacks were not treated equally to whites. Blacks struggled to find high-paying jobs. Often communities remained segregated or divided up by color. Blacks were not usually made to feel welcome in white schools and churches. Okay, so free Blacks in the North, northern states banned slavery. Black people faced unequal treatment in northern states. They had trouble finding good paying jobs, and they often had separate schools and churches for Black people in the North. So we see something that we hear a lot about sometimes lately. It's called virtue signaling, and there's quite a few Northerners who feel like the North is more, is better, has higher moral standards because they don't allow slavery, yet at the same time they're still making some pretty racist judgments about people based on skin color. There's quite a bit of segregation. People do not get equal treatment under the law in northern states. So yeah, they banned slavery, and that's a great start, but they still had a long ways to go in the struggle for equality. About half of all free African Americans lived in the South, working as laborers, household servants, or craftsmen in towns and cities. Many white Southerners viewed Blacks as dangerous. They feared Black people who were free would make their slaves discontent or unhappy to be in slavery. And that really sounds funny saying that, but that was the reality. They thought that their slaves would look at other Black people who were not slaves and go, gosh, I want that. And truly, we know that it doesn't take seeing someone who's not a slave to know that you don't want to be a slave. So the South started to create strict laws that forbid free Black people from owning guns, from traveling without documentations, for working in certain types of jobs. All of these were methods of keeping African Americans or slaves or former slaves or freed Black people as keep them from holding any sort of power. They couldn't vote, so they weren't treated as citizens, even if they were born here in the United States. So free Black people in the South worked as laborers or servants in towns. Whites were afraid that free Black people would make their slaves unhappy. For the rest of the notes today, you're going to use History Alive, Chapter 19, Sections 4, 5, 6, and 8. You're going to read each section and then provide answers with written in complete sentences right here. And each of these are it usually asks for 2 or 3 examples from the textbook that talk about the working conditions, living conditions, how slaves were controlled, and family life of slaves. Okay, so you're going to use the rest of class to do that. Thanks for tuning in. See you later.